I'll start in English from here. So nice to meet you all. Thank you for coming to the seminar. So my name is Kyungmin Lee. I'm working at the Department of Education, specialized in educational research methodology, particularly in qualitative inquiry. And I do study, and my personal research interest is to understand how technologies, especially recent technology like AI, with its own agency, having its own power upon people's practice in everyday life or teaching and learning context. That's what I do, which is called Critical Studies in EdTech. And this is my very privileged have Dr. Sperling today with us. Thank you so much for accepting our invitation. So as some of you may know that I've been working on the new project, understanding how AI digital textbook in South Korea. As a policy, it has been enacted. The process of enactment was so complex. So to understand the complex process of how policy as a document come into the classroom all the way through, we decided, myself and my team have decided to use ANT, which is actor network theory, and taking post-human approaches to understand and to unpack those complexity as the assemblage. And while we're doing it, we're all very new to the area and methodological approaches. We're all kind of, frustrated almost. And then we're trying to find good examples that we can learn and follow. And Dr. Sperling's work has kept kind of coming up. And then we've been reading her work and reading her dissertation. Her dissertation, PhD dissertation, is compiled of different published articles that she has done all the way through her doctoral inquiry. So that has been tremendously helpful for our team and myself. And then we have a couple papers coming out very soon and just now, kind of following you and citing you. So that's, having said that, it's a great privilege to have her, and we really wanted to open her black box. So what have happened actually behind the screen and curtain, what she has done. So now it's our opportunity to actually look into her black box. So let me briefly introduce Dr. Sperling, Katarina. Yeah, I will call you. Can I call you Katarina?
Yes.
Okay. So Katarina holds a PhD and pedagogical work at the Department of Behavior Sciences at Linköping University in Sweden. Her dissertation, as I mentioned, has been compiled with different series of her published works called Beyond Faith. And there is the actually printed copy. I will kind of circulate it around so you can have a quick look. And she did really interesting, witty thing that she put AI in the bracket within faith. You will see later on. So Beyond Faith and the introduction and materialization of AI in schools. That has been her work. Ever since she started her PhD, her research focused on the intersection of data-driven artificial intelligence and teacher practices. In particular, Katarina is investigating the use of AI-based educational technologies in K-12 classrooms. So she's also involved in two major research initiatives at the moment around AI literacy in Swedish K-12 education and teacher education, all conducted at Linköping University under the direction of Associate Professor Linnéa Stanliden. Yeah. So without further ado, I really can't wait. So today she's going to talk about her research experiences, especially focusing on how she analyzed the data and also how she presented data. And yesterday we were having chimek, and then I kind of learned about her a little bit. And actually she used to be specialized in media direction and stage. That's the stage. Artistic. Yeah, exactly. That was the word that I was. Yeah, she was working in the museum. So probably her artist feels really comes through very clearly in her work at the moment, coming from her past experience as museum exhibition director. Okay, that sounds better. So the topic of today's talk, as you can read on screen, is drama, maps, and comic. So shall we welcome her? I'll welcome her with a big applause. Big round of applause.
Thank you. So thank you very much for the introduction, and thank you very much for the invitation. I'm extremely honored to be here and very excited to present some of my work. I hope to open up the black box of it. I was asked, and that was just amazing, because as I guess in Korea, also in Sweden, everyone wants to know about the AI. So how should we think about AI? What's the future of AI in education? And the invitation here was, so how did you do your research? How did you represent your data? And that's just so much more fun to talk about, I think, personally. So thank you very, very much. And the title of my talk is Drama, Maps and Comics, Opening the Black Box of AI in Education with Actor Network Theory and Creative Methods. And drama, maps and comics are 3 examples that I will give you, and that are ways that I have presented or represented in my papers. So during these 2 hours, I will tell you a little bit about the context of my work, and some of it, as I know that some of you have teaching a profession, some of you are here to study education. I will give you a little bit of context, the flavor of the Swedish school system, and then we will dive into the actor network theory and my interpretation of it, of course, because it's a vast and messy assemblage of many different approaches. So we'll have a short break. I don't know if you used to have long breaks, but I think we'll have a short break just to get some air, and then we will finish off with more of the results of my study and the way I presented them. And then tomorrow there will be a workshops that some of you will attend, and then we will go more into depth. But I do encourage you to be active, to raise your hand if you have any questions, if anything is unclear. I will be very happy to be interrupted at any point of the presentation. Okay. So let's start with the Swedish context. And I just wanted to say where I'm from, because it's Linköping and Norrköping. It can be a bit abstract, but it's like in the middle of Sweden. It's 2 quite small cities, 150,000 inhabitants in both, and we have a mutual university with 4 campuses. So I am actually in the Norrköping campus. The Linköping campus is the main campus. In all, we have 37,600 students, about 4,500 in teacher training. We have 4,300 employees, 4 campuses, 323 professors, 1,200 PhD students, and we have a very long history of teacher training education in Linköping, even since 1860, and offer a very comprehensive degree of programs. So we have preschool teachers, we have primary school teachers, secondary, upper secondary school teacher education. Then we also have a program for vocational teacher education, special needs training, special educational needs, folk high school teacher program. That's a very specific program, and also outside of school leisure home program. So we have a wide variety of programs where you can get a degree to become a teacher. Right now, I work as an affiliated researcher with a new lab that was just established, more or less, the recent years. It's called AI Simulation and Teaching Laboratory, the ICELab, and we are a laboratory that tries to promote research, education, collaboration around AI, simulation, and teaching, primarily to the higher education and teacher education, but we also invite all programs. So we're want to be very interdisciplinary, and we have various stakeholders like edtech companies, developers, also of course local authorities, school authorities, and so on. And my own background, and Professor Lee touched upon it a little bit, as I studied to become an exhibition producer in Linköping University in Norrköping. And I wrote my master's thesis on the virtual exhibition space. This was a long time ago when internet was very hyped and everyone thought that now that we have internet we can all look at the objects online, we don't need the physical places, and of course that we still need them perhaps more than ever. But anyway, I was doing my thesis on that, and I was working for some years on physical exhibitions. But then I switched career a little bit. I worked at a science center. That was my most recent exhibition work at the Norrköping Visualization Center, where we did a lot of communication of science. And then I wanted to shift a little bit more towards education, so I worked, and I'm still actually appointed as a strategist at the Department of Education in Norrköping. And I worked a lot with European projects on school digitization. So I worked with computational thinking for primary education. You have some here, we are in Finland, watching how they used social robots in language learning and so on. And that actually got me more into the AI, because in one of the projects that we called Empower to Learn, we were different partners from Belgium, from the Netherlands, Sweden, and the UK, and we looked at personalization with ICT. And this was 2019-18, and the documents that were coming up was very much around AI and the expectation of AI as a mean to personalized learning. And I got very interested and applied for a PhD position. So that's my kind of entrance to the AI in education. And my past, I've always been very, very kind of optimistic around AI, very curious about how new technologies can kind of promote learning. So that was my kind of mindset when I entered my research field. And as many of you can know, that the past 5 years has seen a huge rise of AI in education globally, locally and globally, with a lot of different policy reports from the UNESCO, UN, and so on. But what was lacking, and what was also pointed out by other scholars, is that we know very little, for example, about how learners and teachers really use AI. And this is still the case, but this was also the case 5 years ago when all these policy reports came out. How AI is embedded or not in the everyday workings of school, and more ethnographic case study work of AI in different educational contexts would add an additional perspective to enrich the important themes emerging from work in this area. This was by Ben Williamson and Rebecca Ainon in 1920. So already there was like a call for more qualitative research in this area, and that was also what I wanted to do. Because we still actually, and this is the case for generative AI, we don't really know how generative AI plays out in education. We have surveys, we have quantitative data, surveys, and so on. But we really don't know how the micro level is enacted, how AI is enacted in the micro level. And as you know, the micro level, the classrooms can look very different from school to school. Within a school, classroom can differ, and not to mention that it differs a lot in different countries. So Swedish classrooms obviously look a little bit different, and this is a sketch which can be difficult to read, but I just wanted to tell you a little bit how it looks like, not go into depth. So we have preschool here, and all kids go to what we call preschool until the age of 6. And then at the age of 6, and this will change because this will change, but right now in the 6, when they're 6, they go to preschool class, and then they start like compulsory school. And we have also special schools, schools for children with learning disabilities. We have Sami schools, which is the Swedish ingenious people that have their own schools, and that's very up north in Sweden. And then compulsory school is up until 9th grade, and then they go to upper secondary. So compulsory school consists of primary 1 to 6, and then lower secondary 7 to 9, and then we have upper secondary, which you enter based on your like average grades. So you can have you can choose vocational, with after 3 years you can apply for work, or you can choose preparation for university. So after 3 years you can apply for university and university college. And there is also this full high school, which you can apply and enter the university on a different quota. So already here, I guess there are some differences between how you organize the school in Korea. But I learned that it's not that different in the compulsory school, right? What's also important to understand that since 20 years we have a very decentralized school system. So before the 1994, the state ran all the schools. Then the state decided to make the local authorities under the municipal lead. So we have 250 municipalities of various sizes and various budgets. So that means already there we have a very big variety. And in I don't remember the exact year when I think in late 90s we divided the system even more. We make the schools more marketized by introducing an independent school reform. So there are many independent schools which are like private schools, but every student have a voucher. So the government pays the private schools for every student that they attract. So we have extremely decentralized schools with many independent schools, which even makes every schools even more difficult to like big variations of school. As for the ICT in schools, it's also important, or can be interesting for you to know, that we have always been a forerunner when it comes to initiatives around ICT. We have had very large governmental investments in the 18s. We developed our own computer even for school. We had one laptop per child initiatives in early 2002. And then we have had a new curriculum in 2017 where we emphasize the digital competencies. and several digital strategies that are now put on hold. We also have a very large variation on education technology. So we are very digitized, and all different kinds of technologies are coming in, both to assess students' reading. Also the generative AI is coming in now as a technology in this work. And currently, I think also, because this affects a lot how AI is being implemented in school, we have a digital lashback. And that's mainly driven not by parents, not by teachers, but by the government. So it's a very polarized topic. We had a new digitization strategy that was withdrawn from the new Minister of Education in 2022. And this is a quote from her. She says that the digitization of school have largely been an experiment with the lack of critical thinking regarding its implementation, often seen as inherently positive, regardless of the content. The EU's Parliament Culture Committee recently called for more video games in school, but the new Swedish government instead aims to prioritize the use of more textbooks. So we have a policy that's actually called from screen to book, to the book cover. It's a game with words, but it's actually a more investments in physical textbook than in digital textbook. And this is, of course, a very political statement, because we have far larger challenges in the Swedish school system than digital textbooks. But anyway, back to school and what I tried to do in my work was to understand, so how in all this context, what happens when AI technologies are being introduced in educational settings, and what does this mean for the teacher profession? Because that was my focus. I decided to look how it affects teacher. And so this is the cover of my thesis, and the title also of the work that I did. So Beyond Faith was actually a way, what I was trying to do to move beyond the many promises of AI in education, what it might deliver, and trying to understand what it meant for the teaching profession. And I put the introduction and materialization there because, and I will show you later also, because I was interested to see both how does it actually enter school in the first place, and then how does it play out in classrooms. So on more meso level and micro level, you could say. But Beyond Faith is also, you could say, methodological proposition of how researchers, qualitative researchers, as well as teachers and policymakers can demystify, in a way, the promises of AI technologies. So we can understand faith as like the fulfillment of a promise. It's about loyalty, in a sense, trusting something to be true, even when there's no empirical evidence. Faith, in parentheses, as in faith, describes the kind of uncritical trust in AI as a game changer. And we see that still today, that can help, alleviate, augment, or automate. And what I found in my research, that this faith seems to underpin really how AI comes into being in the various AI technologies in teaching practice, even when the technology itself actually fails to deliver on the promised outcomes. And faith is also connected very much to automation and augmentation, to the reinforcement of teachers, but it's nothing new. And here's a pictures from Skinner's teaching machine in the 60s, which builds even more on Sidney Presey's teaching machine. I don't know if you have learned. Yeah, you have, some of you nod. You've heard about this. So it goes back 100 years of thinking that students that can learn repeatedly in the pace, have their own pacing in their learning. The machine can deliver the right answer on the right level so that the teacher can do other things, that the teacher be a bit can focus on, I don't know, other things. So this is a very long promise and exists as its own research field. But just like Skinner believed that students who relied on a machine that mechanically can adapt answers based on how students perform, the same kind of promises are being put into all the guiding documents that we can see from UNESCO, even though I have to say there is also a shift right now from the early documents that were far more, let's say, optimistic, and now there is more criticality actually among even the ones that write the UNESCO guidelines. But so this is kind of the background I had, and then in my dissertation project I conducted 3 different fieldworks in primary and secondary schools, and I used like the actor network theory lens. So I will just show you a little bit of the data, because as a qualitative research in education, you tend to collect a lot of data. So, and I have a lot in my entire thesis. So, so I did 3 different fieldworks, and I also did a literature review. And I will not talk about the literature review during this presentation, but I will talk about the fieldworks, which are the empirical work. And the first fieldwork was a machine learning-based intelligent tutoring system. And that in the data that I was produced was just being a part of the project team, because actually that setting I was working at the place where I was working first, and then I kind of switched positions into my PhD. So I already had very much in-depth understanding on that project when I decided to follow it as a researcher. And I did some classroom observations in 4 classrooms in 3 schools. Unfortunately, this was under COVID-19, so I had to follow it up a lot with interviews, which was not the original plan, with both teachers and with participants from the group. And then I decided I didn't want, because the machine learning, the intelligent tutoring system was very focused on maths learning, and I wanted something more broader, something more general. So I coupled up with a company that was developing a learning management system with learning analytics and AI. And I followed that for, the first one was about a year, and I followed this a little bit in parallel for almost 2 years, if you count into all the, let's say, contacts I had and the observations I started to do. So I followed 2 or 3, a little bit more than 3 teachers, but three teachers in depth, and then I also peeked into other classrooms, around 90 hours of observations. Then I did 13 in-depth interviews with representatives from the EdTech company, teachers, principals, also from the local school authority. I participated in some meeting when this system was introduced. I observed from a workshop with first 30 students, then with 15 teachers. So I had a lot of data with this learning management system. And it was also, the part of it was that the company wanted to co-design it with the teachers. And then this part of this learning management system turned into an app on well-being. So I followed the way this well-being app was being introduced in an upper secondary school, and I have 17 video recorded meetings with 5 teachers, and each of the meeting is around 20 minutes. And also interviews. I visited also, so I did some field notes from the school. So that's my data. And you can do a lot of things only based on this data, as you know. And then my research questions, because I know that some of you are PhD students here, or yes? How many of you are PhD students? No? No one? Oh yes, one PhD student, okay. But some of you are master students and perhaps want to be a PhD student. Yes, okay. So this is more for you to show how I organized my work. So I had 3 different research questions. The first one, how is it introduced? And 2 of my papers respond to that. And the second research question, so the first one is the literature review, and then another one which shows more the different actors, more of another level. I will tell you a little bit more about these papers. The second one, how does it materialize? So how does it actually look like in the classroom? So that's the 3 other papers. And then I had a third research question, which actually is which the kappa, we called it a kappa response to, and what are the implications for the teaching profession. Do you call it kappa here too? No. In Sweden we call it kappa. That's a direct translation of coat. So it's something that wraps around all your, like if you have a compilation thesis, so it's supposed to wrap around all your, but it's not only a summary, it's also a contribution of its own. And so you can have a research question that's actually, as you see here, you have the aim, and then you have the different research questions that corresponds to different papers, and then you can actually have a research question that corresponds to your kappa. Yes, so this is just an outline. This is not what I usually present, but it could be interesting just to compare from how you organize your work here. So this is a little bit of the context. And now I was thinking to dive into the theoretical lens that I use, actor network theory. And Latour himself have actually criticized the whole concept or the name of actor network theory, because this is not a theory. It's rather, it has some theoretical concepts, of course, but it's very much a methodology of how to study technology, for example, in action. So you can say that. And it's grounded in science and technology studies in the 80s, and provides the study with a set of concepts to explore the relational dynamics of technology in situated practice. So it highlights the importance of examining both the social and the material dimensions of technology to better understand what these means for teaching and learning. And we have Bruno Latour, that's one of the kind of main characters of this theory. He has written a lot, and I will cite Bruno Latour a lot, but of course there are others like John Law and Michel Calon and Madeleine Ackrich, and then later Anne-Marie Moll. So there is also, this is kind of the fathers, but then Actor Network, we have evolved a lot. So there are a lot of different approaches also to network theory. And from its very inception, actor network theory has aimed to understand the processes of technical and technological innovation and knowledge productions of science and technology. There are a diversity of approaches in various disciplines. So it's in education research, it's quite still yet considered as innovative, but it's quite more applied in the humanities, of course, and in geography, for example, organization and management, and so on. And this means there's no right way to conduct actor network theory. I think it's also within the kind of, let's say, rebellion atmosphere of actor network theory. It kind of loses its strengths if you try to say that this is the right or this is the wrong way, because it's also something that's changed depending on the actors and how they relate, so to speak. So there is not a singular way to conduct actor network theory research. Rather, it should be seen as a broad proposition of numerous overlapping theoretical concepts and methods. But what's common, and that's very important, it's underpinned by the principle of general symmetry and a relational materialist ontology. So everything that's made up is based off the relation between the material and the social. And these are equally important in the analysis, so that's the symmetry. It doesn't mean that what the humans do and the tables is equally important as the humans in that sense, but when you do your analysis, you put as much attention to the table as you do to the human. But obviously you also cut the network, you don't look at all things. I will go into that. And the concepts that I use quite the basic concepts in actor network theory. It's actors, it's networks, and it's the concept of translations. So I don't know how many of you have each one of you familiar with actor network theory in this room? It's okay. You cannot be. Are you familiar? You are familiar. Okay, so you are not. So that's good. So I'm very happy. Then I can explain what an actor is. Or actors. And you can also call it actant, or perhaps that's the more original word when it's put into work. But I try to simplify the terminology. That's kind of have been my goal. And an actor is a human or non-human entity that acts. As such, it is capable of exerting force and coming together. Always, it's something that always changes, or change something in relation to others. So it's nothing fixed. It's always change. And most notably, an actor never acts in isolation, but always in relation to other actors. That's the whole philosophy here. And the understanding of an actor is rooted in its conceptualization of reality of something that's relational and enacted. And then we have networks, or a network. So AI in education, or an intelligent tutoring system, can be conceptualized as a network of different actors. It can be code, databases, infrastructures, platforms, interfaces, human experts, scientific commercial settings, methods, research traditions. So you actually decide which actors to follow and where the network is. And it has nothing to do with the understanding like technical social network. It's very important to say that it doesn't have that kind of meaning. There is no physical, you can't, it's in the construct of the researcher. There is no real network out there. But it's a way of analyzing and kind of making your data more comprehensible for yourself also. The more actors come together and make up, for example, an intelligent tutoring system, the more they render the network durable, and the more invisible and black box it is. Because the more actors, the more complex it is, the more interactions, and then you really don't know what's going on here. It's like now with the generative AI, it's such a huge black box, so that there's so much that's not clear to us, and it's all from how it's trained to all the material resources in there to how it's enacted in different settings and so on. So the black box concept comes from this. So it's not a thing, but a description of the point-to-point connections that are left behind by actors, and that can be traced. So the main study subject is to trace the networks in the work if you do an actor network theory. So the question is what makes a network successful? Then we have the concept of translation, and that's also a very specific theoretical concept that can be kind of mixed up with the word, how it's used in translating from one language to another, and it has nothing to do with that. It has to do how different interests of different actors, how they change the other actors. So the power dynamics within a network can be described by translations. And Latour himself has actually said that sometimes actors network theory is also called like the sociology of translations. So the aim of the sociology of associations is that there's no society, there's no social realm and no social ties, but there exists translation between mediators that may generate traceable associations. So it's for the founders of this theory method, translation is actually what's the most important thing to look at. And also there are different stages in this translation project. So you have the first stage, which is there is a problem for of some sort, and actors try to gather around a problem, and often there is perhaps one actor that's a developer, and he kind of puts the problem into the into the world, and tries to get engagement for other actors. And then you have the stage of interestment where actors gather and try to convey their interest to other actors. Then you have a third stage that's called enrollment, and then the fourth is where actually all actors are mobilized to kind of think in a way or be in a way. So that's the final stage, and this is kind of let's say into depth. I'm not using this terminology in many of my papers, but it's very often used as a way of as a heuristic, you can say, to look at a process of technology development or implementation. But usually it's not as hierarchical, because this picture makes you think that technology development goes from one point to another, but it's just a theoretical construct, you can say, and it's not as linear and as it looks like. But as a part of the first step, an important step is to create in the network is to create the point of passage where all the interactions are more or less have to pass. So very often, like in the case of my studies, it was the technology that I studied that became the obligatory passage points that all actors, the teachers, the local school authority, the national agency, students had to pass to reach their different goals. And of course it can be different actors and different goals in the other end, but this was one concept that I used, obligatory passage point. But then if you look at this, you can have a network with many actors that have to pass obligatory passage points. But in some complex areas that you will study, you will find that, hey, but not everyone is passing that AI engine, but they're still working in the same direction. So there are sometimes in the networks, there are different obligatory passage points. And this is a kind of an extension of actor network theory, not an extension, but Susan Lee Starr and Griesemer, I don't remember his first name, developed a concept called the boundary object, but actually it was Susan Lee Starr that developed this concept of boundary objects. So to say that there are that collaboration can exist with the help of the boundary object, even if the obligatory passage points are different. And I also, as I saw that in my work, I applied a different term. So what Latour calls actor network theory. So it's a simple way for the social scientists to access sites. It's a method and not a theory, a way to travel from one spot to the next, from one field site to the next. It's not an interpretation of what actors do, simply glossed in different, more palatable and more universalist language. So it's a description of what's happening, and because Latour and his fellows in actor network theory was also very critical upon social theories that had these kind of, let's say, terms like power or like other sociologists' term that they could not really that they applied to the reality without really unpacking what that was. So no a priori ideas about power. Power is something also that is an effect from the actors and the networks that are assembled. And most important thing then for social scientists is to follow the actors and describe what they do. So it's quite simple, but it's very complicated at the same time, as you will see. And so what I have been trying to do is I have been really trying to use in my papers, and this is also for you PhD students, try to not to use too many terms in one paper, because then you will not fit the 7,000 word limit. So you have to kind of be very, how do you say, economic, or just use the very few that helps you to make your case, to convey the results, and actually put them into work throughout your paper. Of course, actors is something that came back. Network, I didn't apply in all my papers. In some papers, I spoke more about the interactions than the translation concepts, because translation concepts needs a little bit of explanation. And in some I used the boundary objects. Also in the paper 5 I used the moments of translation, the problematizations and so on, but I didn't use it in the other ones. So you can see that I didn't use that many concepts, but this is not like a recipe. Some use much more, much more elaborated. You can talk about intermediaries and so on, but I did not. So how I use it is I used it to show the introduction of AI, what AI is, which means how actors, for example teachers, the AI technologies, how they form different networks. And I then, for the materialization, that means what AI does, I used the interaction concept, the translation concepts, the obligatory passage points and boundary objects to show how these networks hold together, how they're durable. And then I also used ANT to show the implication of this materialization, this enactments of AI for the teaching professions. And what's important, I think, to take with you as when you use ANT, also that research is considered as a creative and very messy project. Mess is a very common word in many ANT papers, as you will see. And data is not reality. That's why I speak of not data collection. It's not something that you go out and collect, but actually just by entering the stage, the field, you are kind of affecting it, changing it, and you produce some kind of accounts that you then analyze. And theory and method are intertwined. You can't separate the theory from the method. It's kind of how you think about something will also be the method or affect the method that you use. And as I told earlier, the ANT is actually foremost a method of following the actors and tracing the networks. But that does not mean that you have, you should, the most important work for you or aim for you is to find networks, because you have to also try to kind of leave the theory behind when you go out in the field produce your data, and then try not so much to think about the theory when you look at your data, but really what is in the data. But then, of course, it will always be an interplay between the theory and what you see in the field. So it's a more, rather than an inductive or a deductive method, it's an abductive method, you could say. And the researcher produces the data. So those were the kind of final points I wanted to make on actor network theory. And I think we could have like just 5 minutes. I know that there are some snacks in the very back, and yeah. Okay.
Katarina, just make sure that, shall we make sure that everyone is okay? They don't have any questions?
Yeah.
Before moving on to the second phase of the
Yes.
speech. Is there anyone who has a burning question related to anything has been mentioned already?
Yes?
For me, you feel like the specialist of ANT, so and so you told us that there's no fixed method in ANT, but what we have to is kind of follow the actors, like what Lakshmi said. But what I want to ask is, what do you think is the most important thing to when we are conducting ANT research? Not only following the actors, but some particular thing maybe?
Yes, and what I just said here to Professor Lee is that I don't define myself foremost as an expert of ANT. I use it because of some, I find it an interesting and very nice way of conducting research, but I obviously use it a very limited, let's say, vocabulary of it. But I will try to answer your question about what is the most important thing to think of to do ANT. And I think the most, well, there's several things, but one important thing is to look at the materiality of the things. So you can follow also, I mean, objects if you want. You don't have to follow human actors. And I think that's the kind of big contribution of ANT, that materiality. I mean, everything that we do, we often in the analysis, we tend to forget about the tables and the computers and the interfaces and all the materials, also social, but things that we interact with and that affect what we do. So I think that's very important to always think, okay, so when you do an interview, for example, sometimes that's the only information that you can kind of withdraw or produce. Then don't ask what human actors think, but focus on what they did. So what did you do? What happened? How did you interact? With the things? If you study the textbooks, for example, what happened? That's important also when you do interviews or when you do field works in classrooms, that you really what's going on. Okay, the human actors do, but what's the material setting? What's the interactions between human and non-humans in this setting? I think that's the key, and that's very important. And I would not say that I have succeeded 100% with that, because that's really, I think, in my next research, that's what I will try to focus on more, on the non-human actors, just because it also opens up our view a little bit of what's going on. And that was one part, and I think I had another thought as well. What's important, but I just forgot it, but I will probably I'll come back to that. Yeah.
All right. So shall we move to actually what you did part?
Yes.
Opening the black box.
So
Thank you.
the third part, opening the black box. So again, I had this kind of data with a lot of produced data, a lot of empirical work based on these different systems, more or less. I mean, the learning management system part of it had some AI implementation and the well-being app too, but not of the AI was implemented during this phase. And an additional way of knowing for me has been to experiment with kind of different creative and narrative methods, because you have all this data and then you have to kind of present it in some way in journals and in papers, and so this experimentation that I have has been both about knowing, understanding my data, but also engaging with the data in some more or less unconventional way. And I have then produced textual accounts and illustration that could be described as allegorical, you could say. So by doing that, John Law, which is one of the ANT fathers, he described this as to see and make several different realities in the same presence. So the machine learning based ITC, I put here, learning management system there. So these three different technologies are presented as an ethnodrama, a visual network analysis that I did, and teaching with comics methodology. So I will tell you a little bit about the three different studies, the ethnodrama, the visual network analysis study, and the teaching with comics study, just to give you, flesh out a little bit how I did. So the first fieldwork, which was the intelligent tutoring system, called also AI engine, I followed an intervention related to maths, and the project involved 22 classes, 22 teachers and their pupils, around 250 pupils, and they were asked to calculate with a digital tool with AI, and they were using this AI engine 10 minutes 3 times a week, so not that extensively, during a 6-week period. And as you know, that there was some personalization attempts here. There were other researchers also, because I was one of the researchers that was seeing how this actually worked out in practice, but there was also these didactic researchers that had the intervention design, and they were interested to see if students practice with this AI engine, will their results become better because of the personalization, because of the personalized content that the students get. So my first paper actually presents if this was successful, and as you can see of the titles, still waiting for the automation of teaching and exploratory of machine learning in Swedish primary education using actor network theory, the very long title. It alludes a little bit on, or very much, of Beckett, Samuel Beckett's absurd theater play that's called Waiting for Godot. I don't know how familiar you all are with that, but it's, yeah. Are you familiar with Waiting for Godot? Some of you are. I can go into details later, but anyway. So there were different main actors. We had the local school authority, university, teaching aid, but also, of course, students, teachers, and other developers. And as more, the idea was that the more students will use the intelligent tutoring system, the more accurate the answer would be. Now, this is a different recommendations for you, because the best thing to use ANT for is when there is a problem or something doesn't work as it should, because that's when you can actually trace the networks. Then that's where you can trace where translations between actors fail. And also within this project there were some problems, so the networks are particularly visible when things go wrong. And I'm going to just give you some example of one of the problems. And this is me speaking to the teacher, Lucy, and she teaches in 5th grade. And she told me that there was some kind of errors within this system that the student reacted to. So I asked her, so what kind of errors did the student react to? And she says, well, it was like this programming error, and I don't have it in my head, but it was like 2 minus 1 equals 1. 2 minus, but the computer told them that it equals 3. So it was wrong calculation method. The computer miscalculated these super easy. So it was minus, and then there was something that thought that, so the students were quite irritated. But actually, this was not really an error, but it was the teaching aid author that had been sloppy. Because these systems, they don't calculate. There is no comprehension behind. It's just a prediction, and if it was predicted, so they have the input and output, and if the output is wrong, then it's not so easy also to correct it, because then the one that did the error, he tried to fix it very quickly and very easily. But that didn't work, because then already the students had been trained and on the erroneous, the wrong answer. So the algorithm had trained that 2 minus 1 equals 3. And to compensate for that, the teaching aid author had to redo the entire module, throw out the old one, because it had already instilled the wrong algorithm. So this is what biases, this is how biases in AI can manifest. It's quite unharmful, you can say. It's very irritating to train on something that's wrong, but anyway, this can happen. So algorithmic bias, but also algorithmic decision makings, and it shows that there are embedded assumptions about when someone has learned something, which is one of the dilemma. And yes, because I didn't say about the frozen image, because there was a frozen that the system froze all of a sudden, and the students couldn't proceed in exercising. They was trying to exercise. There was a limited number of exercises, and they were supposed to become better by just doing arithmetics. But all of a sudden, for many students, particularly in the higher grades, the screens froze, and nobody, not even the teaching aid authors, understand why it froze. But that was because if the system But the system was programmed so that if it's 70% probability that you will pass, then you will continue to the next exercise. And then because of these students were so successful and there were no harder exercise in that module, the entire system froze. And we didn't know about that. What happened then was that the teaching aid author, again someone who was working really hard to make this work, put in 2,000 more exercises in the same module. But then he had to add so much variety that for some students this was too difficult too. But anyway, so that's the decision-making part. There was a dilemma with the technology. But then you would think that it didn't work perfectly. What did the teachers still say about this AI technology? So Samuel, which is one of the teachers, she said, well, it's a bit fascinating how the AI engine works. I would like to be better at explaining to the students how it can know. And I think it's great, and I think there will be even more of this personalization. And I also think it's good because then often teaching is perhaps at the wrong level. So she was still thinking that, okay, so it didn't work perfectly, but it will work perfectly in the future. And Becky, another teacher, so she said, well, I think, the engine scans every student individually on each occasion during a lesson. While I see them all at the same, but only during a tiny occasion. So of course, it can be more attentive than I can be. So as you can see here, the faith remained even though the technology broke down. And I think that the dilemmas here for the pedagogical practice was, of course, this continuous data collection going on in the classroom, transparency. Teachers, instructional developers, researchers don't really understand how these commercial technology works. And also algorithms are not neutral. They're based on very specific ideas of how you learn and how schools, teachers and students work in classrooms. A lot of extra work, both of teachers who had to redirect their students and so on. And again, the not knowing also kind of held up this faith in technology. And also kind of undermine their own sense of trusting their own expertise by thinking that the technology can see their students all the time. So by entering the field, I became increasingly critical, but much because of the faith that still existed. So I also speak about folkstomation. So you think of there's some kind of automation going on, but instead there's a lot of human labor that's not visible when you speak about AI in education, and that will always be needed for this technology to kind of enact automation or augmentation in certain ways. And this is the mechanical Turk. It was an invention in the 18th century, where you had a human being that was actually, you thought that this was that you could play with that you played with a robot kind of automated player, but in reality there was a human hiding inside of this. And perhaps you know from Amazon that speaks about human Turks that a lot of labeling is actually made by humans and so on. What you think is automated is not. And I used the obligatory passage point actually as a very important concept, where the AI engine was kind of could explain why this faith in the AI engine could sustain, because it was something that hold together the networks, the network of actors. And I crafted this, and it's not really clear from the excerpt. My fieldwork was, and the interview transcripts and field notes were crafted into what Saldana calls an ethnodrama. So I wrote it in 2 acts, and it was kind of inspired by Waiting for Godot, which is about 2. How do you call these kind of who don't have a home, 2 like poor men? Homeless? Yeah, you could say. They go about and they meet and discuss that they're going to meet Godot, which nobody knows in the play who is that Godot, but they believe that this Godot will come and that it will be something good, and the whole drama is more or less about waiting for this Godot, but there are of course other aspects of the drama. But I use this kind of concept of Godot as AI being something very unsettled, very unknown what it is, but that's something that we wait for all the time. So by saying that, I could also kind of communicate that there is an almost absurd expectation in this, and we don't know what it is that we're waiting for. So it added to the analytical mode. Why I also choose the drama, because I could see clearly in my work that there was this expectation, then things happened, and then the expectation remains. So there was a dramatical line of events during this fieldwork, but also I wanted to kind of convey a lot of my empirical produced data, a lot of what the actors said and did. And the ethnodrama actually allowed it, because as you perhaps know, in scientific papers, you use 2 lines of an interview that's 10 or 15 pages long, just to state your example, and then you have like a page of analysis, and then you use 2 lines again. And I wanted to show more of what they actually said, because that was the most interesting thing for me to convey, because it's what they say is kind of, yeah, I wanted the actors to have room to express themselves. So that's why I used the ethnodrama. And after having done that...
Sorry, can we just ask a question?
Yes.
So actually, we read that particular paper you just presented during our class last semester. And one of the questions that we got is whether the excerpts that you had put in your ethnodrama, was that to which degree that you added it to make it a form of ethnodrama, or all those excerpts were as they were in real life interview settings?
No, I did.
Yes. How did you? Can you unpack that process? Like how you decided? Because that was like fine line of kind of crossing the, I don't know, real data, and somebody may say it's subjective novel, that you kind of present the participants' voices in your own sake of telling the story or your argumentations.
Yes.
So how did you handle that part?
Yes. Well, I tried not to change. I mean, sometimes you have to, in interviews, people say a lot, and you want the first part and the last part. So I did that, and I didn't do the brackets, but I tried not to change what they said or the meaning or the context, because also you can easily just take out 2 sentences and change that. So I tried to kind of put it in line as if they were actors on the stage. Yes, that was also my kind of intention, to show that we are all actors on this kind of stage. But yes, I tried to be as, let's say, honest with the context, with the setting, with the actors, and also when I staged each act, I tried to show a little bit how it looked like. So I mixed the field notes, crafted the field notes vignettes, you could say, and mixed it with the interviewed data. But see, when I think about it, it was such a. I worked very hard on this paper to make these two. From the beginning, it was 3 acts, and then I had to reduce it and things like that. So it's also a process. It is a creative process, but it's not entirely fictional. I mean, I haven't put anything into what actors are saying, but they didn't. Becky and Samuel were not in the same interview.
Oh, I see.
But they were different. I had separate interviews. So sometimes they come in the same setting in the drama, but that can that can be perhaps considered as too fictional. But again, I think that's not the main point. I mean, it's the synthesis of trying to show like the main flesh out the main essence of this fieldwork, and you can do that in different ways. And I experimented with ethnodrama, and I actually, when starting off, I didn't know there was such thing as an ethnodrama, that you could do that. That's something that because I knew when I had all my data, I wanted to write a drama. I wanted to write it as a play, and I knew nobody will accept a paper that's written as a play. That's crazy. So after some months after, I learned that there is something as an ethnodrama, and that you can actually perform your ethnographical fieldwork as a drama. You can dramatize it. I didn't go that far though, but so my play is not intended to be performed, but.
Thank you.
And I can say I decided never to do an ethnodrama again because it was very complicated. Now I have rethought, perhaps I will do an ethnodrama, but at that time I thought that was just a too complicated idea. So when I ventured to the classroom and I had this other field work with the co-design of a learning management system that I told you about, yes. So I followed a company that developed a learning platform with learning analytics that were aiming to augment teachers. And as part of this, I observed and interviewed teachers at a primary school and also an upper secondary school. So, and this learning management system had many different features, but what I found most interesting was the learning analytics dashboard. And learning analytics, I don't know how familiar you are with the term, but it's a way of kind of visualizing data and support teachers with the visuals on how students perform or how they feel and so on. And there was a lot of these kind of features because the person that developed this, he was a researcher in learning analytics. And this learning management system, it captured data when students arrived at school, when they opened their laptops and logged into the system. The system immediately asked them, so how was your morning? Did you have breakfast? Did you sleep well? To display kind of analytics for the teacher to know more about the preconditions of their students. And then after each lesson, the system also asked the students, how did you learn a lot? What do you think the lesson was good, and etc. A lot of different questions about the quality of teaching and their learning experience and so on. And I was very interested in how does the teacher actually interact with this learning analytical dashboard, because the research on this is it's a field that has emerged to, you can say that it kind of has existed for 10 years or 15 years, but there's still really no evidence that this improves learning. And it's a quite vast field. So I was interested to see, so what does the teacher do with this data? Because as you can see here, these different color dots, and you can perhaps see it better on your screens, represent different pupils. And then, and this is like on a more individual level, where teacher can see what the individual student answered in relation to 5 questions, I think, in the morning. And the blue is everything is fine. The light blue here represents some of the answers are not good. And here the red represents that the majority of answers were negative. So the teacher can immediately spot that, well, this student, pupil 1, he was in a very bad condition on the 3rd, 10th, 11th, 16th, and so on. Perhaps some are not present even, and so on. But while this was very happy, and this is a very happy student all the time, and so on. So kind of complex, really, matrix of understanding students' well-being. And what I wrote, one of the papers is around it, which is where we kind of combine data around this and data from the previous study on the intelligent tutoring system to write a paper on how we break the magic of automation and augmentation, because what I could see in the interactions from the teachers is that the teachers had to use their professional knowledge about the students to make any sense of these numbers or of these answers. Like the teacher could say, well, I knew this because I'm in the classrooms all the time. I knew why this student answered this negatively. He's not negative, but I know that he answered like that because he's just protesting, etc., etc. But so you don't need it, I ask her, but because you already know this. Well, it's still good, because you know, otherwise it's just my gut feeling. But now I have this, you know, and it was also a way of being accountable towards the principal or towards the parents. And also when the statistics were good, for example, when the statistics was good for the teaching and so on, teacher could be happy about it and could trust the numbers and say, yes, I delivered very good lessons, because look here, 98% successful lessons based on all the data. But I mean, some complexities risen out of this was, I mean, where's the pupils' integrity? Why do they have to answer? Would we like to answer every day if we slept well, if we ate breakfast, and etc.? I mean, sometimes we had a tough morning, but we don't want to tell everyone, and I think that counts for even small students too. And it also undermined the relation between teachers and students, because sometimes students didn't want to put a negative, and then when asked by teachers if something was wrong, they tell no, nothing was wrong, and there already you have a kind of mismatch. And so, and the system of course undermines this kind of professional competences, because people that work in school, they always build relations with their students, and they know these things eventually just by, you know, by small bodily interactions that the students perhaps is not totally in the best mood today. So in whose interests are these? But this field works also, I did not really see that much interaction between the LMS and the teachers. They used it a little bit in the class, but it didn't really fit in well. And why didn't it fit in well? They said it was nice, but still they didn't use it very much. And I started to kind of broaden because when I was in the classroom, I couldn't see very much. So I had to what kind of networks around the development of this LMS is kind of exploding. And I tried to map everything, and you can't understand this because it's in Swedish, but this is the technology and the different actors, human actors here. So I tried to kind of map. These are the teachers in the middle school. And they are using a school platform, and this is the local school authority here. And I spoke to some of these actors, and oh, this is a mess. And here am I, and here are other researchers, and this is another university, and this is the funding agency, and you know, I tried to make sense of all of these actors. And when I showed this to my supervisor, they said, but this is really interesting. You should write a paper about this. So that's what I did in my... So I tried to kind of flesh out 3 different stages of that entire co-design process. And I did that with the help of interviews. So I was fortunate to have the EdTech developer, the one who actually developed the product, to tell me about the story behind, because that I wasn't a part of. I just came in the middle of the process. And I crafted all this manually also, and the dots do not represent. There is no different in size. They just represent a kind of something that acts as an actor, you could say. So we have the startup as an actor. We have the university, that's very important. And I've also what I did here, I tried to do some kind of sequences. So first we have the researchers developing some kind of AI machine learning software. And then they're approached by the university holding company that says, well, you can commercialize this. You should do some kind of software around this. And so he connects the researchers with a company accelerators, and they in turn have venture capital that can fund the startup. But they also communicate with the local school authority that have funding from the European Commission for digitization. So you see already here we have some kind of triple helix constellation, and this is the network that holds together the kind of the first phase of the LMS. Then in the next phase, more schools are being attracted. So you can see that first there is a problem. You can say this is the phase of problematizations. We have the problem that schools are not working entirely with data-driven methods. So you have learning analytics coming as a solution, and also AI as new potential to fix education. And then in the next phase, you enroll actors into this network increasingly. So you have first one school and a second school that give feedback on to the startup on a prototype. You have COVID-19 that comes with extra funding. All different kind of, let's say, networks, actors. You have a publisher that also is connected to the startup, so that you can eventually do more AI-generated content. You have a test bed. I don't know if that's common, but through a test bed, the startup can connect with schools. So this is the more second phase, where more schools come and have different demands of how this LMS should be used, and how, and so it's more collaborative in a way, and the LMS is much informed what the students need. But then in the third stage, and it's here, it was almost impossible, because I saw that the startup was on different on edtech venues, and it had a social media that was kind of influencing it a lot, and it had the schools needed to have the LMS to adapt to other LMSs that they were working with. So already at this stage, the LMS was not an obligatory passage point, because they were not using it much, and it was very complex and difficult to trace. And what was happening in the third stage is what the co-design shifted very much towards integrating the system and towards commercialization. So not so much how can we develop something good, but how can we commercialize it. So what all this process ended up was a well-being app, which was the whole idea, not to develop something add-on to already LMS that they had. But anyway, so this is very complex, and I realize this should be just a one presentation, because it's really difficult if I try to explain it to you. But anyway, I used the visual network analysis and the boundary object. And the boundary object is what kind of kept these networks together. So in the first place, you could say it was data-driven education, or AI in education. And in the second phase, it was co-design, that the idea, all the actors could, whether they use the LMS or not, they could like gather around the co-design as something very important. And the third phase, it was very much about the well-being, that well-being is something that could really be traced or datafied in a way, and that's a good thing, because everyone cares about their students. So I wrote the behind the scenes of co-designing AI and LA in K-12 education as a result of that. So I think we have 10 minutes, and I'm going to rush through the third paper now, which is the well-being app, because you see, I follow the actors, right? So you asked me what's the most important thing, how to do. So it's still following the actor, because this LMS turned into an app, or at least it had one output that was the app. So I decided I have to, what happens with this app now? And it extended from the second fieldwork, so this is a third fieldwork. And the app was developed in very close collaboration with a Swedish upper secondary school, and it was implemented school-wide as a part of their engagement in a professional development program on data-driven school improvement. And students were asked to complete a weekly survey consisting of 8 questions through their they were doing that with their mobile phones, and the survey was based on the PERMA model, which is like 160 questions related to happiness and well-being, but it was reduced to 8 questions. So students were asked about their well-being. So how would you rate your well-being from 1 to 5, more or less? How would you rate it from the past week? So they were to reflect on their well-being for the past 7 days, on their motivation, their social relationship with teachers and other students, their academic performance, if they were depressed or if they was anxious. And then teachers got the statistics in a learning analytics dashboard, and these were very advanced. There was pie charts, line charts, different matrices, similar to what you saw. They could see on an individual level. They can see it, check it out over time, etc. I collected quite a lot of data from this, and I transcribed, read, reorganized this, and I identified actors and the networks and translations. And the data that I had was the way I looked at it was very affected by the fact that I followed 5 teachers, a group of teachers, 4 to 5, and different numbers during the different meetings, through video, and their recording system split up their faces into different sections like this. And that, when I looked at the videos from the meetings, and during these meetings they analyzed the visualizations. When I tried to go through the data, I had to look at the video material in this way. So this technical setup was very instrumental for me to experiment with reading and later crafting data into comic-inspired episode through a method that's called Thinking Through Comics by Laurier and Sabetti. And comics can also, in a way, be likened to a network which allows for different readings. It's not very linear and so on. And similar to the other papers that contains, some of them at least, the first, the ethnodrama, that contains an allegorical reference, this one also does. So I kind of was inspired by Fantastic Four and how they got all kind of challenges that they have to handle. They have their different superpowers, and they have to handle what is thrown at them, because these teachers had to really handle this kind of app that they were to introduce in their school. So I divided this kind of data that you saw into different episodes, and each episode relates to one moment of translation. So I used that concept into this, and the first concept, so it's a little bit also of a process because they implemented this over a school year. So the different episodes represent one moment of translation, and the first moment is, of course, in the beginning of the project. So I will give you an example, I think I have the time still, from an early phase of the implementation, and this is a conversation between 4 of these teachers, Reed, Ben, Johnny and Susan, and the conversation makes it possible to trace the different actors that associate in the early stage of this network. And however, as expressed both by Ben and Johnny, the Wellbeing app is not really translating into the interest without teaching contributing to a lot of heavy lifting. So this is the episode. And I'm just going to read out what they say here. Yeah, so there have been so many teething problems. Yeah, but they have talked, so it's the company, have talked about letting the students see their own historical data. Maybe then they will be motivated. So already here in the beginning of November, they have some problems with students actually wanting to answer and comply with this. And Johnny says, well, as long as they don't feel we're not doing anything, the risk is that they will not answer later. And when you speak to parents at parents-teacher meetings, there was a parent yesterday who said, a damn app can't replace the conversations. Do you really think they'll answer honestly in this? She thinks we have too much faith in the whole thing, but that was her opinion, and he's a bit skeptical, this teacher. And he continues to say, well, I can agree to use this tool, but I want it to be ready. I don't want to be involved in developing it and spending a lot of time making it work. I just don't have the time to report everything. We spend half of a mentor time on it already. So these are mentors. We have a system that teachers are also mentor for individual students. So these are mentors for a group of students. But someone has to do the heavy lifting, Ben says. Isn't it true that we can't draw too many conclusions from this? But in the long run, so he has some faith in this. Yes, that's right, Red. That's we have to give it some more time. And what you can see in this is that teachers actually have to, at the company, the data is incomplete and it's difficult for them to act upon. And there are really dilemmas emerging here. And this is what can be seen in the other episode here. I'm not going to go into detail, but this episode tells about that teachers they are given from the local school authority. So what do you see, what kind of analysis do you make sense of this class? And they ask them to work with the data, so they have to act like data analysts, but they can't really make sense of it. Some of the students, one teacher said, let me give you two examples. I have one student here marked all of the answers as red. Worst in all categories. Then I have a student who seems so depressed that I thought surely would be red, but the answer were almost all green. So this can only give an indication. But that indication can be totally wrong. So it's but they still believe that this can give them some answer, but it can be totally wrong answers too. They know that. And you can also see the lines are really good. These are like, this should be low and this should be high to have something positive. The only thing that varies here is the workload. And this is Christmas. So it's nothing, they can't make any sense of this. So what happens in this stage is, okay, so we can't use it, but students can use it for their own self-reflection. So the entire process shifts for the teachers trying to make the students answer because the data can help them to understand themselves. So that's the second episode. Yes. So there are many dilemmas here that they can't trust their students and related to the knowings, etc. To sum up, increase of teacher workload undermines teacher-students relations. Examples of how the necessary infrastructure of implementing AI and LL, learning analytics, is actually being created. I think that's important thing. Teaching doing a lot of work and changing the roles as data analyst, and well-being as a new area of commercialization. So to conclude, I mean, the findings show that AI is produced and performed by humans and the technological artifacts, and it's very vague, undefined, it's in the making, shifting all the time, and I think that goes also for the, I mean, I didn't look at generative AI, which is now kind of really changing the infrastructures in classes a lot, but it's quite similar. It was business as usual combined with a lot of significant labor that teachers had to do to integrate these different software. And in doing so, they had to rely on their judgment and their professional expertise. But that work was very much hidden, and this is the controversy. The promises of AI, automation and augmentation are upheld by teachers that carry out significant amount of work, which is often invisible and unspoken of. And this work can at least in parts be explained by faith in the technology. But more than transforming and innovating educational practice, the AI promises of automation is just a different way of doing more of what was already done in a sense. So accordingly, the introduction of AI, what we then discussed in the CAPA, was that it can lead to increased demands where teachers do more work than previously. And this is also a paradox that they have to rely on the professional ethical judgment for AI to be introduced and materialized in classroom, and meanwhile this judgment is undermined by these technologies. But there was also, of course, dilemma with privacy, misinformation, and protections, like companies being able to come into classroom and take a lot of data from students, which we as researchers cannot do. We have to have ethical vetting and everything, but to be a test bed in schools, it's kind of not very complicated now, and that still counts for generative AI. So there is a very kind of imbalance between ethic companies near schools right now, and placing student information in contexts that are not primarily focused on educational needs and are not under democratic control. And I think that's the critique I put into, and a very important offer in, or suggestion is to put more emphasis of teacher professional knowledge in relation to AI and promote their phronesis, their kind of ethical judgment. That means understanding both what these technologies can do and cannot do. So AI literacy in a sense. So to conclude, Sarah Pink, a famous, a scholar in social sciences, also in critical EdTech, wrote that we need new methodologies through which we can create our own agendas toward ethical, inclusive futures built on rigorous understanding of everyday futures. So I think that is something that I try to do, and I think there's only creativity or like imagination that stops us from imagine different ways of doing research, because it's very much needed right now where more and more research is very generic in a sense. Journals, you have this journal format that you have to confine with. But I think also with AI, and that's a good thing, that as AI is kind of flooding the system with very, fake papers, I think perhaps more creative papers will be well seen and even more accepted. I hope for that. Anyway, I hope you could draw something from this presentation and be confident in your own creativity while doing research. And thank you very much for listening. I'm still around if there are any more questions, of course.
Thank you so much. I think probably we can take just a couple of quick questions from the audience. Anyone? I mean, I do have a lot though. Shall I throw mine first and then, I can see Sunny.
I have a small question. Thank you so much for your presentation. It was so insightful. But it was really interesting how, though in the beginning you introduced how actually the government is going against the grain, and they're trying to reintroduce paper textbooks again. And yet in the schools, though, the teachers still have this faith towards the AI. And so since the government is not promoting AI, the datafication, probably for political reasons, but I was wondering how that kind of political conversations are also factoring into the teachers and their faith in AI.
Yeah, I think we have an AI commission in Sweden, and that have done agenda for Swedish employment of AI in all sectors, but they have got how do you call that? Something where they can't speak. They have been forbidden to say anything about schools, but they've been very positive around all other sectors. So it's actually, I think what's happening now is that teachers are a bit lost around. They have no strategies of how to handle AI, which is already in their classroom, because all the students, Swedish students, are using ChatGPT as study buddies, as completing assignments, and so on. So it's I would say it's a critical situation, and the Ministry of Education is not allowed to do professional development for teachers and so on. So I think actually teachers are asking for some help, how to not only integrate. Some of them are integrating AI and doing a lot of experiments, and they are doing tours around entire Sweden and showing how to use generative AI, and that's not a good thing either. I mean, we need to have a national strategy around it, but we don't. So it's difficult for teachers.
Go on.
Thank you, Professor. I have one small question related to epistemology of knowledge. So until now, knowledge has been produced and validated by humans, because of AI. So this paradigm becoming to change. AI is not just tool; it's a producer of knowledge today. So imagine if AI eventually surpasses humans in this world. What does it mean for how we understand knowledge, scientific authority, and human role in defining what counts as a knowledge? So, and could be moving from a world shaped by Western knowledge toward one increasingly shaped by AI knowledge?
Yes, that's a very difficult and good question. It is what many of these frameworks around AI emphasize, is that we need to kind of put even more emphasis at what it means to be human, what intelligence means, what difference intelligence from artificial intelligence, and what does it mean to know when you can just ask ChatGPT or when you can generate any answers. I'm a bit worried about the fact that we think that we are getting knowledge, in a sense, because there's nothing that knows anything. It's just statistics, it's large language models, it's a statistical assemblage of the most probable word in a sentence that we are getting. So there is no basis, or no, if you compare it to symbolic AI, which was the paradigm of AI before, data-driven AI. Then you had in expert systems, you had an expert that inserted some kind of knowledge base for what you were communicating. But here you only have the next word prediction and it looks, and it's so I don't use it. I also say that it's a service, because the whole purpose with these with generative AI and these services is that we are to be engaged with the system as much as possible, and it's put to us in a sense so that we think that the machine knows something, but sometimes it even hallucinates. I mean, we know the hallucinations, they are there because to generate trust in us, even that the system doesn't, or the language model cannot generate a correct response. It generates an incorrect response. So I don't know, it's not a question of it's not a reply for questions, but I don't really think that these systems can replace our knowledge in a sense. But the fear is that they are not now very much trusted. And as if we look already how AI is integrated in, you Google something, but you get the AI generated response at the first thing that you look on. So many students are using AI instead of Googling things. So I think that's the most critical thing, that we are retrieving what we think is knowledge now that is not. Yeah,
great. Just quick clarification. So the boundary objects.
Yes.
Can you just briefly explain how you take that term? How do you understand boundary objects?
Yes, I understand it as something that can. So, for example, AI in education, or for example, data-driven education, it's like terms that can make people in this room to work together, but it's likely that you have different interpretation of that term, but it's still something that can make you all collaborate. So it's something that unites different actors, but also groups in a project that collaborate about something, but it's a very floating term, and as soon as you try to define it too much, it can dissolve the network. So it's a good thing that AI is so, we don't really know what it is, because that can attract many people in the network to work around it, and you kind of in different communities, you load it with different meaning.
Okay. So can we say that it's always uncertain, rather abstract kind of actor turning into boundary objects? I think that's how you kind of point out.
That's how I interpret it, but you can also have like a map can be and that's a very concrete thing, but that can also be a boundary object. I mean, you can have concrete, and I think that that seminal paper that I referred to was how they built it up, actually how they constructed the Natural Sciences Museum, I think in California. Like California is a boundary object. I mean, but that's something you can have as a boundary object. Also, a map of something can be a boundary object. It can be more or less concrete, but it's something that makes many actors work around together. I mean, it's in a way it's a passage point, but passage points in the sense how Michael Calon explained it in his seminal paper on the scallops on the fishermen's in France. That was more, the researchers had the idea, they opposed it on others, and when that failed, the network broke. But boundary objects is more, let's say, flexible, and you can have many different passage points, as I said, in one network.
So when we actually analyze and identify boundary objects, we can focus on more of the roles it actually play within the network.
Yes.
Or between networks.
Yes.
That's how it's better.
That's
to
how I
understand
did it, but that's my interpretation of it. But you can use, because sometimes not all the terms in A&T are useful for you. So I think you can look at also other like later interpretation or other post-human how do you say spheres.
Yes. Thank you. I mean, we could have continued the conversation tomorrow, but just for those people who are later watching this video, I just wanted to make sure that clarification of the boundary objects is done here. All right, so I think that's it.
Yeah,
it's like 2 hours and 15 minutes, just passed so quick. And I don't know, I just enjoyed it too much, and I feel like quite tired now, and I guess that you too. So thank you for everyone for coming, and if you have any questions, I'm pretty sure Katarina can be around for the next 10 to 20 minutes, so you can feel free to come and introduce yourself to Katarina.
And if you have questions that pop up in your head in 2 weeks, don't hesitate to write me an email. I didn't put my email address there, but you have my name, and it's you can Google it up and you will find it. Linköping University Katarina Sperling, and then you will come to my you will find my information. Yeah.
So shall we express our great appreciation by round of applause? Thank you so much. All right, so have a good evening, guys.